The transport ship's engines hummed quietly as it approached Arcturus Prime through the small window. Yuna Kim watched the Academy's massive structure come into view. The building looked like a crystal castle floating in space, with towers that sparkled against the stars. Her heart beat faster as she realized this was really happening. She was going to be one of only 3 humans ever accepted into Stellar Command. Academy. The docking bay was huge and filled with beings she had only seen in textbooks. A tall creature made of living crystal walked past, its body reflecting rainbow colors in the light. Near the entrance, a massive rock-like being stood perfectly still, looking like a statue until it turned its head. Floating above them, a cloud of purple gas moved in patterns that seemed almost like dancing. Yuna picked up her single bag and walked toward the registration desk. Other new cadets moved around her, some flying, some walking on 4 legs, others sliding across the floor like liquid metal. She had studied dozens of alien species during her preparation, but seeing them in person was completely different. "Name and species," said the clerk behind the desk. The clerk looked human but had silver skin that glowed softly. "Yuna Kim, human," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The clerk's eyebrows went up slightly. "Human, you're the 3rd one this year. Very unusual." He handed her a datapad and pointed toward a group of other new cadets. "Join Orientation Group 7. Your squad assignments will be announced after the welcome ceremony." Yuna walked toward the group, feeling dozens of eyes watching her. She heard whispers in languages she didn't understand, but she caught a few words in Galactic Standard. Human, primitive, interesting. The orientation group had about 20 cadets from different species. A crystalline being about her height stood near the front. Its body was made of clear blue crystal that seemed to pulse with inner light. Next to it stood a creature covered in metal armor that looked like it had been built rather than born. Floating above them was a cloud of gas that shifted between purple and green colors. "Welcome, new cadets," said the orientation leader, a tall being with gray skin and 4 arms. "I am Instructor Keth. You will spend the next 4 cycles learning the basic rules and structure of the Academy. Your first lesson is simple: forget everything you think you know about your own species' superiority. Here you are all equally ignorant." Some cadets laughed. Others looked offended. Yuna just listened carefully. "Let's start with introductions," Instructor Keth continued. "State your name, species, and primary ability." The crystalline being stepped forward first. "I am Veltar of the Crystalline Hegemony. I can manipulate energy fields and project defensive barriers." The armored creature spoke next, its voice sounding like it came from a speaker. "I am Fox of the Iron Dominion. I am equipped with advanced combat systems and tactical analysis capabilities." The floating gas cloud condensed slightly as it spoke. "We are Wisp of the Cloud Collective. We process information at accelerated rates and can exist in multiple locations simultaneously." The rock-like being's voice was deep and slow. "I am Granite of the Stone Brotherhood. I possess enhanced physical strength and resistance to most forms of damage." Other cadets introduced themselves. Yuna learned about species that could phase through solid matter, others that could survive in the vacuum of space, and some that could communicate telepathically across vast distances. When her turn came, Yuna felt very small. "I'm Yuna Kim, human. We're good at learning and adapting to new situations." Several cadets made sounds that might have been laughter. Veltar's crystal body flickered brighter for a moment. "Learning and adapting? That's not really an ability, is it?" "Every species learns," added Dox. "What makes humans special in that regard?" Yuna felt her cheeks get warm, but she kept her voice calm. "I guess we'll find out during training." After orientation, the cadets were assigned to their dormitories. Yuna's room was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out at the stars. Her roommate was another human named Hannah, a quiet girl with serious dark eyes. "That was embarrassing," Hannah said as soon as the door closed. "You made us sound weak." "Did I?" Yuna asked, unpacking her clothes. "Learning and adapting? Everyone does that." "You should have said something about human endurance or our ability to eat different foods or something." Yuna hung up her uniform. Maybe, but I was curious about their abilities. Did you notice how Veltar's crystal body got brighter when it was excited? And Fox's voice definitely comes from a speaker system, not organic vocal cords. So? So. I'm wondering what happens when Veltar gets too excited. Does it get brighter and brighter until it can't control it? And if Fox's voice comes from a speaker, what happens if that system gets damaged? Hannah stared at her. Why are you thinking about that? Yuna shrugged. Just curious. The next day, classes began. The first session was Basic Galactic Combat Theory, taught by Commander Vex of the Void Empire. Commander Vex looked like a shadow that had learned to walk upright, with glowing red eyes and a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Combat? In space is different from combat on any single planet, Commander Vex explained. You must understand not only your own capabilities, but also the capabilities of your allies and enemies. Different species excel in different environments and situations. He divided the class into mixed species squads for practice exercises. Yuna found herself grouped with Veltar, Fox, Wisp, and Granite, along with several other cadets from different species. Our first exercise is simple, Commander Vex announced. Each squad will navigate an obstacle course designed to challenge multiple types of beings. You have 1 hour. The obstacle course was inside a huge room that could change its environment. As soon as the exercise began, the room became a maze of floating platforms, energy barriers, and shifting gravity fields. Fox immediately took charge. I will analyze the optimal path. Granite, you handle any physical barriers. Veltar, use your energy manipulation for the force fields. Wisp, scout ahead and report back. What about me? Yuna asked. Stay close and try to keep up, Fox said. DISM-ISS-IVLY. As they moved through the course. Yuna watched her teammates carefully. She noticed that Veltar's crystal body became slightly dimmer each time it manipulated energy. When Granite lifted, a heavy barrier, small cracks appeared in its stone skin that took several minutes to heal. Wisp moved very quickly as a gas cloud, but when it reformed into a more solid shape to communicate, it seemed to need a moment to reorganize itself. Veltar, Yuna said during a rest break, that energy manipulation is amazing. Does it make you tired? How many times can you do it before you need to rest? Veltar's crystal body flickered. It requires energy, yes. Why do you ask? Just wondering. On my planet, humans get tired when we use our muscles too much. I was curious if it's the same for you with energy. Of course it is, Veltar said. Any ability requires energy. That's basic physics. Right, of course, Yuna said, smiling. How long does it usually take you to recover? Veltar looked at her suspiciously, but answered. Perhaps 10 minutes for full energy restoration, depending on the intensity of use. Later, when Granite was moving another heavy obstacle, Yuna walked beside the massive stone being. You're incredibly strong, Granite. Does lifting heavy things hurt you at all? Stone does not feel pain as other species understand it, Granite rumbled. But excessive stress can cause structural damage that requires time to repair. How long does repair usually take? Minor cracks heal within hours. Major damage may require days. That's fascinating, Yuna said. And your balance? I noticed you're very stable, but what about on uneven surfaces? Granite's stone face turned toward her. Why do you ask so many questions, human? Sorry, Yuna said quickly. I'm just really interested in how different species work. On Earth, we only know about human biology, so this is all new to me. Granite made a sound like rocks grinding together, which Yuna guessed was laughter. Curiosity is not a flaw. Yes, uneven surfaces require more concentration to maintain stability. By the end of the exercise, Yuna's squad had finished in the middle of the rankings. Not the worst, but certainly not the best. As they walked back to the dormitories, she heard Thox talking to another cadet. The human asks too many questions. Thox said, She seems more interested in talking than training. Perhaps that's how humans learn, the other cadet replied. Though it seems inefficient. Yuna pretended not to hear them, but she made mental notes about everything she had learned. Veltar needed 10 minutes to recover from energy use. Granite required time to heal from structural damage and had balance issues on uneven ground. Thox seemed to rely heavily on its analytical systems, and Wisp needed time to reorganize when changing forms. That night, she sat at her desk and wrote detailed notes about each species' capabilities and limitations. Hannah watched her from her own bed. "What are you doing?" Hannah asked. "Just writing down what I learned today," Una said. "It's all so interesting." "You really are curious about everything, aren't you?" Una looked up from her notes and smiled. "You could say that." The morning alarm echoed through the dormitory at exactly 0600 hours. Una woke up quickly, as she always did, and noticed that Hannah took much longer to get moving. Around them, she could hear other species starting their day in different ways. Some cadets didn't seem to sleep at all, while others needed much more rest than humans. Today was their first real combat simulation, and Una felt excited, not because she wanted to fight, but because she would get to see how different species performed under pressure. In the dining hall, she sat with her squad from yesterday. The table was designed to accommodate different types of beings, with special sections for those who absorbed energy directly, others who needed liquid nutrients, and regular sections for species that ate solid food like humans. "I don't understand human food," Veltar said, watching Una eat breakfast. "You consume dead organic matter. Doesn't that make you sick?" "Not if it's prepared correctly," Una replied, taking a bite of something that tasted like eggs, but was probably made from plants. "What do you eat? I mean, how do you get energy?" "I absorb ambient energy from my environment," Veltar explained. "Light, heat, electromagnetic radiation. It's much more efficient than your method." "That sounds amazing," Una said. "Do you ever run out? Like, what happens if you're in a place with no energy sources?" Veltar's crystal body dimmed slightly. That ... would be problematic. But such places are rare. What about really cold places? Does that affect how much energy you can absorb? Cold temperatures do reduce efficiency, Veltar admitted. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. I'm trying to understand how different species survive in different environments." Thox looked up from its own meal, which seemed to involve plugging a cable into a socket in the wall. "Human curiosity appears excessive. Do you question everything?" "Pretty much," Una said with a smile. "For example, I'm wondering how you eat. Is that electricity, and what happens if the power goes out?" "I require electrical energy to maintain optimal function," Thox said. "Backup power cells provide approximately 72 hours of operation if external sources are unavailable." "Only 72 hours? What happens after that?" "System shutdown would be necessary to preserve core functions." Una nodded thoughtfully. "And your armor looks really heavy. Does that ever slow you down?" "My exoskeleton provides protection and enhanced strength. The weight is not an issue due to powered assistance." "But if the power assistance failed?" "That is extremely unlikely," Thox said. Sounding slightly annoyed, Granite spoke up from the end of the table, where it was absorbing mineral supplements through its stone skin. "The human asks many questions. In my culture, questions show wisdom." "What?" "About you, Granite?" Una asked, turning to the massive stone being. "Do you need to eat those minerals every day? And how do you stay balanced when you're so tall and heavy?" "Mineral intake is required weekly, not daily. Balance is maintained through distributed weight and low center of gravity calculations." "What if someone knocked you off balance?" "Would it be hard to get back up?" Granite made its grinding stone laugh sound. "It would require significant force to unbalance me. But recovery would take time due to my mass." Wisp, who had been floating silently above the table, suddenly condensed into a more solid form. "Why do you seek to understand our limitations, human? Most species focus on learning about strengths." Una felt her heart skip a beat, but she kept her expression curious and innocent. "Oh, I'm interested in strengths too. But I guess I'm thinking about teamwork. Like, if I know when someone might need help, I can be ready to assist." "An interesting perspective," Wisp said, its gas form shifting colors. Most beings prefer to hide their weaknesses. Well, we're all on the same team here, right? Yuna said, we should help each other. After breakfast, they headed to the combat simulation center. The room was enormous, with walls that could project any environment imaginable. Today's scenario was an asteroid field with variable gravity and limited atmosphere. Commander Vex stood at the center of the room, his shadow-like form somehow more intimidating in the dim light. Today you will learn that space combat requires adaptation. The environment will change every 15 minutes. Your squads must work together to secure 3 objectives while defending against automated defense systems. The lights dimmed, and suddenly they were floating in space among spinning asteroids. Yuna felt her stomach lurch as the artificial gravity shifted, but she forced herself to focus. Thox analyzed the optimal approach, called Deho, a senior cadet from the crystalline hegemony who had been assigned as their squad leader. Veltar, prepare energy shields. Granite, take point position. As they moved through the asteroid field, Yuna continued her questioning, but now she framed it as tactical concern. Veltar, how long can you maintain that shield? She asked as energy bolts from automated turrets bounced off the barrier Veltar was projecting. Approximately 8 minutes at this intensity, Veltar replied, strain evident in its voice, and after that? How long before you can make another one? 5 minutes minimum for recovery. Good to know, Yuna said. Thox, those sensors you're using to track the turrets, do they work the same way in all kinds of interference? Electromagnetic interference can reduce effectiveness by 30 to 60%, Thox admitted. What about your mobility in zero gravity? Any issues with the weight distribution? Minor recalibration required, but manageable. When they reached the first objective, a data terminal that needed to be accessed, Yuna watched how each species adapted to the changing environment. The gravity shifted to lunar level, and she noticed that Granite had trouble adjusting its movements, taking larger steps than intended. Wisp seemed to have difficulty maintaining cohesion in the thin atmosphere. Wisp, she said, are you okay? You seem to be having trouble staying together. Atmospheric density affects our structural integrity, Wisp admitted. We can adapt, but it requires concentration. How long can you maintain focus like that? Perhaps 30 minutes before coherence becomes difficult. The simulation continued, with the environment changing from asteroid field to ship interior to planetary surface. Each time, Yuna asked questions that seemed designed to help the team but actually gathered detailed information about everyone's capabilities and limitations. Granite, that low ceiling is making you crouch. Does that affect your fighting ability? Confined spaces reduce my effective combat range and mobility. Veltar, the temperature just dropped. Are you still able to generate the same amount of energy? Cold conditions reduce efficiency by approximately 20%. Thox, all this dust in the air, is that affecting your sensors? Particulate matter does interfere with optical and thermal detection systems. By the end of the simulation, their squad had completed 2 of the 3 objectives, putting them in the middle of the rankings again. As they walked back to the debriefing room, Yuna overheard conversations from other squads. The human in Squad 7 asks a lot of questions, one cadet said. Too many questions, another agreed. She seems more interested in weaknesses than strengths. Perhaps humans are naturally paranoid, suggested a third during the debriefing. Commander Vex analyzed each squad's performance when he reached Yuna's squad. He paused. Squad 7 showed adequate coordination but failed to fully utilize available resources. Deho, your leadership was acceptable but not inspired. The rest of you performed within expected parameters. He turned his glowing red eyes toward Yuna. Cadet Kim, you ask many questions during operations. In real combat, excessive communication can be dangerous. Yes, sir, Yuna said. I'm still learning how everyone works together. I want to make sure I can help when needed. Admirable, but focus on your own performance first. After the debriefing, Deho approached Yuna as the squad dispersed. His crystal body was a deeper blue than Veltar's and more angular. Your questions are becoming disruptive, he said bluntly. Combat requires focus, not conversation. I understand, Yuna replied. I just want to be a good teammate. Then train harder and talk less, Deho said. The academy is not a place for idle curiosity. That evening, Yuna sat in her room with her notebook, adding to her growing collection of information. She now knew that Veltar's energy generation was reduced in cold conditions and that maintaining shields drained power quickly. Thox's sensors could be disrupted by electromagnetic interference and dust, and its mobility was affected by power distribution issues. Granite had trouble in confined spaces and on uneven surfaces and required time to adjust to gravity changes. Wisp had difficulty maintaining coherence in thin atmospheres and could only focus on structural integrity for about 30 minutes. Hannah watched her writing and shook her head. You're going to get in trouble if you keep asking so many questions. People are starting to talk. What kind of talk? Yuna asked. Some cadets think you're weird. Others think you're stupid. A few think you're trying to make everyone else look bad by pointing out their limitations. Yuna looked up from her notes. What do you think? Hannah was quiet for a moment. I think you're up to something, but I don't know what. The next morning brought weapons training. Each species had different strengths and preferred different types of equipment. Humans were issued standard energy rifles, which were considered adequate for most situations but not specialized for any. 3 weeks into the academy term, Yuna's reputation as the overly curious human had spread throughout the first-year cadets. Her questions had become a source of entertainment for many species, and she often heard whispered comments as she walked through the corridors. There goes the human with all the questions, someone would say in Galactic Standard, not bothering to lower their voice. I heard she asked Commander Vex how shadows eat, another would respond, causing laughter. She probably wants to know how many times we blink per minute. A third would add. Yuna kept walking, her face calm, but she listened to every word. Let them think she was just a curious fool. It made her job easier. In advanced tactical studies, Professor Zenka, a spider-like being with 8 eyes and 6 arms, was explaining multi-environment combat scenarios. The classroom was filled with cadets from dozens of different species, all taking notes on their various devices. Combat effectiveness varies dramatically based on environmental conditions. Professor Zenka was saying, using 4 of his arms to operate a holographic display. A species that dominates in one environment may be helpless in another. Yuna raised her hand. Professor Zenka's multiple eyes focused on her with what looked like annoyance. Yes, Cadet Kim? Professor, when you say helpless, do you mean completely unable to fight or just less effective? Several cadets made sounds of amusement. A cadet from the Iron Dominion, similar to Thox but with silver armor instead of black, spoke up. The human wants to know the difference between helpless and useless? More laughter filled the room. Professor Zenka held up one of his arms for silence. The degree of effectiveness reduction depends on the specific environmental challenge and the species' adaptability, he answered. Some species become completely non-functional. Others merely operate at reduced capacity. What kinds of environmental challenges cause the biggest problems? Yuna asked, ignoring the continued snickering. Around her. Temperature extremes, atmospheric composition, gravity variations, electromagnetic interference, and radiation levels are the primary factors. How quickly do these effects usually happen? Like if someone goes from a normal environment to an extreme one, do they lose effectiveness immediately or gradually? Now the laughter was more open. A crystalline being 2 seats over from Veltar spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Perhaps the humans should focus on learning basic tactics before worrying about environmental variables. Maybe she's planning to become a weather reporter instead of a soldier, added another cadet. Professor Zenka looked irritated. Cadet Kim, while environmental awareness is important, you might benefit from focusing on the fundamental principles we're discussing rather than specific scenarios. Yes, sir, Yuna said, settling back in her seat. But she had gotten the information she wanted. Environmental changes could affect species either immediately or gradually, and the severity depended on how extreme the change was. After class, as cadets filed out, Yuna overheard more conversations about her. She asks about weaknesses more than strengths, one cadet was saying to another. It's like she's trying to find ways to defeat everyone, the second replied. Typical human paranoia. They see enemies everywhere. Veltar approached her as she gathered her materials. Yuna, may I speak with you? Of course, she said, shouldering her bag. They walked together toward the dining hall. Veltar's crystal body was pulsing slowly with soft blue light, which Yuna had learned meant the being was thinking carefully. Your questions in class today, ... They seemed focused on vulnerabilities rather than tactical applications. Did they? Yuna asked innocently. I was just trying to understand how different environments affect different species. But why focus on negative effects? Why not ask about environments where species perform better than normal? Yuna considered her answer carefully. I guess I'm thinking about worst-case scenarios. If I know what might go wrong, I can help prevent it or compensate for it. That's actually logical, Veltar admitted. But some cadets are interpreting your interest differently. How do you mean? They think you're looking for ways to exploit weaknesses rather than account for them. Yuna stopped walking and turned to face Veltar directly. Do you think that? Veltar's crystal body flickered brighter for a moment, then dimmed. I'm not sure what to think. Your questions are always tactically relevant, but they do focus heavily on limitations. Maybe that's because I want to be useful to my team, Yuna said. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest or smartest species here. If I can't contribute through superior abilities, maybe I can contribute by understanding how to support others when they need it most. That makes sense, Veltar said slowly. I hadn't considered that perspective. They continued to the dining hall, where Yuna joined her usual table with the rest of her squad. The conversation that day was about upcoming field exercise, a week-long survival and combat training in the Academy's environmental simulation complex. The exercise will test our ability to operate as a unit under various conditions, Deho was explaining. We'll face multiple scenarios designed to challenge different species' capabilities. What kinds of scenarios? Yuna asked, granite's deep. Voice rumbled from the end of the table. Unknown. The Academy does not reveal details in advance. But generally speaking, Yuna pressed, what kinds of challenges do these exercises usually include? Thox answered this time. Environmental extremes, resource scarcity, equipment failures, enemy encounters, and time pressure are common elements. Equipment. Failures? Yuna asked with interest. Like weapons malfunctioning or communication breakdowns? All equipment is subject to potential failure during field exercises, Deho said. It tests our ability to adapt and overcome obstacles. What happens if someone's life support systems fail? Are there backup protocols? The table went quiet for a moment. Wisp condensed into a more solid form to speak. Why do you always ask about what might go wrong, human? Do you expect disaster constantly? I just want to be prepared, Yuna said. On Earth we have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. A pessimistic philosophy, Deho observed. Maybe, but it keeps people alive. After dinner, Yuna was walking back to her dormitory when she encountered a group of senior cadets blocking the corridor. They were from various species, but they all looked hostile. The curious human, said their leader, a being that looked like it was made of liquid metal. We've been hearing about your interesting questions. I don't know what you mean, Yuna said, trying to step around them, the liquid metal being flowed to block her path. Questions about weaknesses, about failures, about what happens when species can't perform their functions. I'm just trying to learn, Yuna said. Or you're gathering intelligence, said another senior, this one from a species she didn't recognize. It had too many teeth and eyes that glowed in the dark. Planning to sell information about Academy defenses to hostile forces. That's ridiculous, Yuna protested. I'm a cadet here just like everyone else. Humans are newcomers to galactic society, the liquid metal being said. Many species don't trust your motives. My motives are to graduate and serve alongside the best soldiers in the galaxy, Yuna said firmly. Then stop asking questions that sound like enemy reconnaissance, the toothy being snarled. Focus on your own training instead of probing everyone else's limitations. They finally let her pass, but Yuna could feel their eyes following her down the corridor. When she reached her room, Hana was already there, sitting on her bed with a worried expression. I heard about the confrontation with the senior cadets, Hana said immediately. News travels fast here, Yuna replied, setting down her bag. Yuna, people are really starting to talk. Some cadets think you're a spy. Others think you're just weird. A few think you're trying to sabotage other species' performance to make humans look better. Yuna sat on her own bed and looked at her roommate. What do you think? I think you're collecting information for some reason, but I don't think it's malicious, Hana said. The question is, what are you really doing? I'm trying to understand. How to be an effective team member, Yuna said. Humans don't have natural advantages like other species. We're not stronger than the Stone Brotherhood, faster than the Wind Riders, smarter than the Crystalline Hegemony, or more durable than the Iron Dominion. If I want to contribute, I need to find ways to help that don't require superior physical or mental capabilities. So you're looking for ways to support others when they're struggling? Something like that. Hana was quiet for a long moment. That's either really thoughtful or really devious. I can't tell which. The next day brought combat simulation in a new environment, an Arctic wasteland with extreme cold, high winds, and limited visibility. Yuna's squad was paired against another squad in a capture-the-flag scenario. Soon as the simulation began, Yuna noticed the effects of the cold environment on her teammates. Valtara's crystal body became visibly dimmer, and its movements were slower than usual. Thox's joints made clicking sounds that hadn't been there before, and its sensors seemed to be having trouble penetrating the swirling snow. Veltar, how? Are you holding up? She asked during a brief rest behind a snow barrier. Functionality reduced to approximately 60%, Veltar admitted. Energy absorption is minimal in these conditions. Can you still project? 6 weeks into the academy term, the mockery had become routine. Yuna walked through the corridors each morning knowing she would hear whispered comments about the question girl or the human who wants to know everything. She had learned to ignore the snickers and focus on her real purpose. Her notebook had grown thick with detailed observations about every species in the academy. She knew which beings needed specific atmospheric conditions, which ones relied on particular types of energy, and which environmental factors would reduce their effectiveness. More importantly, she had started to see patterns in how different species' weaknesses could be exploited together. The morning started like any other, with basic physical training in the main gymnasium. Cadets from all species worked together on exercises designed to improve general fitness and coordination. Yuna was running on a track that curved around the main exercise area when the emergency alarms began blaring. At first, everyone assumed it was another drill. The academy ran surprise emergency exercises at least once per week to keep cadets ready for real crises. But something felt different this time. The alarm pattern was wrong, and the automated voice announcement that usually explained drill procedures never came. Commander Vex appeared in the gymnasium within minutes, his shadow form moving faster than Yuna had ever seen before. Behind him came several other instructors, all looking tense and urgent. All cadets maintain current positions, Commander Vex announced, his voice echoing unnaturally through the large space. This is not a drill. The academy is under attack by hostile forces. Emergency protocols are now in effect. The gymnasium fell silent except for the continued blaring of alarms. Cadets who had been exercising stopped what they were doing and looked around nervously. Some species immediately moved into defensive formations, while others seemed confused about how to respond. Instructors will coordinate evacuation procedures, Commander Vex continued. Squad leaders, take charge of your units. Everyone else, remain calm and follow instructions. But before anyone could organize properly, new alarms began sounding. These were different from the attack warnings. They were environmental emergency signals. The lights in the gymnasium flickered, and Yuna felt a strange tingling sensation in the air. Life support systems are being compromised, announced Professor Zenka over the communication system. Multiple environmental hazards detected throughout the academy. All personnel prepare for emergency conditions. Suddenly, sections of the gymnasium began changing. The temperature in one area dropped rapidly, causing frost to form on the equipment. In another section, the air began shimmering with heat distortion. A third area filled with thick, choking gas that made breathing difficult. Strange electromagnetic fields crackled through a fourth section, causing sparks to fly from electronic devices. Yuna realized immediately what was happening. Someone had designed these attacks specifically to target the weaknesses of different alien species. The cold would disable crystalline beings like Veltar. The electromagnetic interference would disrupt cybernetic species like Thox. The toxic gas would affect beings that breathed normal atmosphere. The extreme heat would cause problems for species that required stable temperatures. Panic began spreading through the gymnasium as cadets realized they were trapped in sections that specifically threatened their survival. Crystalline beings clustered together, trying to share body heat as their energy absorption failed in the cold zones. Cybernetic cadets stumbled as their systems malfunctioned in the electromagnetic fields. Gas-breathing species choked and wheezed in the toxic clouds. The instructors were shouting orders, but they were having trouble coordinating a response because the environmental hazards were affecting them too. Commander Vex's shadow form seemed to be dispersing in one of the energy fields. Professor Zenka was moving slowly as if the atmospheric changes were making him sluggish. In the middle of the chaos, Yuna stood in a section of the gymnasium that remained relatively normal. The attackers had designed their assault to target alien species, but they had apparently forgotten about humans, or maybe they just didn't consider humans dangerous enough to worry about. She looked around the gymnasium and saw exactly what she had been preparing for during weeks of seemingly innocent questions. Every species was being attacked through their specific vulnerabilities, and she was probably the only being in the room who understood all of those vulnerabilities completely. "Veltar?" she shouted, running toward the cold zone where several crystalline beings were huddled together. "This way! I know where you can get warm." She had noticed during her observations that the heating system had backup thermal generators near the equipment storage area. The crystalline beings could absorb heat energy directly from those systems to restore their power. "Follow me," she called to them. "Stay close together and keep sharing energy until we reach the heaters." The crystalline beings looked confused, but Veltar recognized her voice and began moving. "How do you know where to go?" Veltar asked, its crystal body so dim it was almost transparent. "Just trust me," Yuna said, leading them through sections of the gymnasium that avoided the worst environmental hazards. When they reached the equipment storage area, she showed them how to access the thermal generators. These produce concentrated heat energy. You should be able to absorb enough to restore your power quickly. As the crystalline beings began recovering, Yuna ran back into the main gymnasium. Now she needed to help the cybernetic cadets who were staggering around in the electromagnetic interference zones. "Thox," she called out, "over here!" The interference is weaker near the main support pillars. She had learned from her questions that electromagnetic fields were disrupted by certain types of metal construction. The Academy's support pillars were made of materials that would provide some shielding. "How do you know this?" Thox asked as she guided it toward safety. "I asked about your sensor systems, remember? You said metal structures could provide interference blocking." One by one, she began helping different species escape from the environmental traps. She led gas-breathing beings to areas with better air circulation. She guided heat-sensitive species away from the thermal zones. She helped gravity-dependent beings find stable surfaces in areas where artificial gravity was fluctuating, but as she worked, she realized this was bigger than just the gymnasium. The alarms were still blaring throughout the academy, and she could see through the windows that other buildings were experiencing similar attacks. Whoever was doing this had simultaneously targeted the specific weaknesses of every major species in the galactic community. Deho appeared beside her as she was helping a group of liquid-form beings solidify after exposure to freezing temperatures. His crystal body was brighter now that he had absorbed energy from the thermal generators. "How did you know how to help everyone?" he asked urgently. "I've been paying attention," Yuna said. "But we need to get organized. These attacks are coordinated to target specific species weaknesses. Someone planned this very carefully." "You seem to understand these weaknesses very well," Deho said, giving her a suspicious look. "Because I've been studying them for weeks," Yuna replied. "Everyone thought I was just being annoying with my questions, but I was learning how different species function so I could help when needed." "Help or exploit?" Deho asked. "If I wanted to exploit weaknesses, don't you think I would have done it by now?" Yuna shot back. "Instead, I'm helping everyone survive." More cadets were gathering around them as word spread that the humans somehow knew how to counter the environmental attacks. Species that had been mocking her questions for weeks were now looking to her for guidance. "The Stone Brotherhood cadets are trapped in the high-frequency vibration zone," reported a flying cadet from the Windrider species. "The resonance is causing structural damage to their bodies." "Take them to the lower levels," Yuna said immediately. "Underground areas have natural vibration dampening. They can heal there without continued damage." "How do you know that?" the Windrider asked. "I asked Granite about structural repair requirements during our second week here." As more reports came in from around the academy, Yuna realized the scope of the attack. Every major species weakness was being exploited simultaneously. The attackers had somehow gained detailed information about the Academy's diverse population and designed their assault to target maximum vulnerabilities. "This isn't random," she told Deho. "Someone has been studying us just like I have, but they're using the information to attack instead of protect." "Who would do such a thing?" "I don't know, but we need to organize a response. The instructors are being affected by the attacks too, so it's up to us." Yuna looked around the gymnasium at the cadets who were now looking to her for leadership. Species that had considered her weak and foolish were now depending on her knowledge to survive. "Listen, everyone," she called out loudly. "These attacks are designed to target specific species weaknesses, but they can be countered if we work together. I need squad leaders to report the status of their teams so we can coordinate evacuation and defense." As reports came in, Yuna began organizing a response plan. She assigned species to areas where they could function effectively while avoiding their vulnerabilities. She coordinated teams to rescue cadets trapped in hostel. The Academy's main corridor was chaos. Cadets from dozens of species were scattered throughout the building, some trapped by environmental hazards, others helping with rescue efforts, and many simply confused about what was happening. The instructors were slowly regaining control as they adapted to the environmental attacks. But it was clear that the organized response was coming from the cadets themselves. At the center of it all was Yuna, calmly directing traffic like she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. "Windriders, I need you to check the upper levels for anyone trapped by the atmospheric changes," she called out to a group of flying cadets. "Avoid the electromagnetic zones on floors 7 through 9. Crystal beings, maintain energy-sharing formations while you move through the cold sections. The thermal generators in sections C and F are still operational. Stone Brotherhood, the structural damage in the East Wing needs immediate attention. But avoid the high-frequency areas until the resonance dampeners activate." Deho watched, her coordinating the response with growing amazement. "How do you know all of this?" he asked. "The Academy's emergency protocols are classified, but you're acting like you wrote them yourself." "I didn't write them," Yuna replied, helping guide a group of liquid-form beings away from a freezing zone. "But I've been preparing for something like this since I arrived." "Preparing how?" Before Yuna could answer, Thox approached them, its cybernetic systems functioning properly now that it was away from the electromagnetic interference. "Cadet Kim, I have completed sensor sweeps of the lower levels. No intruders detected, but I found something interesting." "What did you find?" "The environmental attacks are being generated by devices hidden throughout the Academy. They appear to have been placed strategically to target areas where specific species typically gather." "Can you disable them?" Possibly, but I would need to understand their operational parameters first, Yuna nodded. The cold generators are probably designed to drop temperatures to levels that crystalline beings can't absorb energy from. The electromagnetic emitters would be calibrated to disrupt cybernetic neural networks. The gas dispensers would release compounds that interfere with standard atmospheric breathing. Thox's optical sensors focused on her sharply. You know very specific details about these weapons? Because I know very specific details about the species they're designed to target, Yuna replied. When you understand the vulnerability, you can figure out how to exploit it. Or how to protect against it, added Veltar, approaching with several other crystalline beings who had recovered their energy levels. Which appears to be what you're doing. More cadets were gathering around. Them as word spread that the human cadets seemed to understand what was happening better than anyone else. Species that had been mocking her for weeks were now looking to her for guidance and answers. Hannah appeared at Yuna's side, looking worried and confused. Yuna, what's going on? Everyone's saying you predicted this attack. I didn't predict it, Yuna said, but I prepared for the possibility. How? Yuna looked around at the crowd of cadets surrounding her. Many of them were species she had been asking questions about for weeks. All of them were now depending on her knowledge to survive. Remember all those questions I asked that everyone thought were stupid? She said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I was gathering intelligence about how different species function, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how they respond to different types of stress. Intelligence gathering? Deho's crystal body flared brighter. For what purpose? Originally? To understand how to be an effective teammate. Humans don't have natural advantages like other species. We're not stronger or faster or smarter in any particular area, but we are good at learning and adapting. And now? Veltar asked. Now I know that crystalline hegemony beings need ambient energy to function and become helpless in cold environments. Ion Dominion cybernetics are vulnerable to electromagnetic interference and have limited backup power. Cloud collective entities lose cohesion in certain atmospheric conditions. Stone Brotherhood members can be disrupted by specific vibration frequencies. The crowd fell silent as she spoke. These were the same details she had been asking about for weeks, but now they understood why she had wanted to know. You've been studying our weaknesses, said a senior cadet from a species she didn't recognize. Why should we trust you? Because if I wanted to use this information to hurt you, I would have done it already, Yuna replied. Instead, I'm using it to help you survive. Jinwoo, the other human cadet from her orientation group, pushed through the crowd. He looked nervous and kept glancing around as if checking to see who was listening. Yuna, he said quietly, we need to talk. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here, she replied. Jinwoo hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Everyone's wondering how you know so much about these attacks and how to counter them. They think you're either incredibly lucky or what? Or you're not actually a regular cadet. Yuna looked at her fellow human for a long moment. What makes you think that? Because I know who you really are, Jinwoo said. Yuna Kim, graduated top of her class from Earth's Strategic Intelligence Academy. Specialist in multi-species tactical analysis, recruited for special assignment to Stellar Command Academy. The crowd around them erupted in surprised voices. Some cadets backed away, others moved closer. Deho's crystal body was pulsing rapidly with what Yuna had learned was either excitement or anger. Strategic Intelligence Academy, Veltar said. But you performed so poorly in training exercises. Poorly enough to avoid suspicion, Jinwoo said. Her real job wasn't to excel at combat training. It was to study everyone else and learn how different species could work together more effectively. Is this true? Deho demanded. Yuna looked around at all the faces, some angry, some confused, some curious, and made her decision. Yes, it's true. I'm here on a special mission from Earth's government and the Galactic Defense Council. What kind of mission? Several voices asked at once. Multi-species military units have historically been ineffective because different species don't understand each other's capabilities and limitations, she explained. Command wanted someone to study how diverse species could work together better. My job was to learn everything I could about how different beings function, what they need to perform at their best, and how to coordinate their abilities by pretending to be stupid and asking annoying questions. Granite's deep voice rumbled from the back of the crowd. By being curious and asking the right questions, Yuna corrected. Everyone assumed I was weak because humans don't have obvious physical advantages. That assumption let me gather information without anyone realizing what I was really doing. Information you're now using to coordinate our response to this attack, Thox observed. Exactly. These attackers studied the same species' weaknesses. I did, but they're using that knowledge to harm rather than help. They expected to find everyone disabled and confused by environmental attacks designed to target specific vulnerabilities. But instead, they found organized resistance because you knew how to counter their tactics, Wisp said, its gas form shifting colors rapidly. We knew how to counter their tactics, Yuna corrected. I couldn't have saved anyone without the cooperation of everyone here. Commander Vex's shadow form materialized beside the group. He had been listening from nearby, and his glowing red eyes were fixed on Yuna. Cadet Kim, he said formally, you appear to have information about this attack that goes beyond what any normal cadet should know. Yes, sir. I believe these attackers have been studying the Academy the same way I have. They know about species weaknesses, and they've designed their assault to exploit those weaknesses systematically. And you know this how? Because their targeting is too precise to be accidental. They didn't just attack randomly, they used specific environmental hazards designed to disable specific species. That requires detailed intelligence about Academy population and defensive capabilities. Commander Vex was quiet for a moment. Your assessment matches our preliminary analysis. The question is, how do we respond? We use the same tactics there. Using but in reverse, Yuna said. Instead of exploiting weaknesses, we coordinate strengths. Every species here has abilities that others don't. If we work together properly, we can create a defense that's stronger than any single species could. Manage alone? Explain, Yuna looked around at the assembled cadets. Crystalline beings can manipulate energy and create protective barriers, but they need stable energy sources. Cybernetic species have advanced sensors and tactical analysis, but they need protection from interference. Gas-form entities can scout and infiltrate, but they need support to maintain cohesion. Stone beings provide physical strength and durability, but they need mobility assistance. And humans? Deho asked. Humans coordinate. We understand how all the pieces fit together. Commander Vex's shadow form seemed to grow darker. You're proposing to use Academy cadets as military units against trained attackers. I'm proposing that we survive, Yuna replied. These attackers came here expecting to find confused and disabled defenders. Instead, they're going to find the most effective multi-species military unit anyone has ever seen. Because you spent weeks learning how to make that happen, Valtar. Within an hour of the attack beginning, Yuna had transformed the chaotic Academy response into an organized military operation. The same cadets who had been mocking her questions were now following her orders without hesitation, because her orders made sense and kept them alive. Alpha Team Veltar leads with Granite providing mobile cover. She directed from the Academy's main communications center. Your job is to secure the power generators on level 5. Beta Team Thox coordinates. Sensor sweeps while Wisp provides reconnaissance. I need full intelligence on enemy positions and numbers. The communications center had become an impromptu command post, with cadets from different species working together in ways the Academy had never seen before. Crystalline beings managed energy distribution for the Academy systems. Cybernetic cadets handled data analysis and communications. Gas-form entities carried messages through areas too dangerous for solid beings. Rock-based species provided security and moved equipment. Commander Vex observed the operation with what might have been amazement. In 20 years of military service, I have never seen this level of coordination between different species. That's because nobody ever taught them how to work together properly, Yuna replied, monitoring reports from multiple teams simultaneously. Everyone focuses on individual species' strengths, but the real power comes from combining those strengths. And you learned how to do this by asking annoying questions? I learned how to do this by understanding what each species needs to function at their best, and what they need help with when conditions aren't ideal. A report came in from Beta Team. Thox's voice crackled through the communication system. Command, we have identified the source of the environmental attacks. 12 devices hidden throughout the Academy, each designed to target specific species' weaknesses. Can you disable them? Yuna asked. Negative. The devices appear to be heavily shielded and booby-trapped. Any attempt to tamper with them could trigger additional hazards. Understood. Continue monitoring and report any changes. Deho approached the command station, his crystal body pulsing with nervous energy. Yuna, we have a problem. Sensors indicate multiple ships approaching the Academy. It appears the environmental attack was just the first phase. How many ships? At least 6, possibly more. They'll reach the Academy within 30 minutes. Yuna studied the tactical display showing the Academy's layout and the approaching ships. They're expecting to find the Academy disabled and defenseless. Instead, they're going to find prepared resistance. Prepared resistance? Commander Vex asked. These are trained attackers with military ships. We're cadets with training weapons. We're cadets who know how to work together, Yuna corrected. And we have advantages they don't expect. She turned to address the room full of cadets. Listen carefully, everyone. The environmental attacks were designed to disable us before the real assault begins. But we're not disabled and we're not defenseless. We know this Academy better than they do, and we know how to use our different abilities together. What's the plan? Veltar asked. We turned the Academy into a trap, Yuna said. They studied our weaknesses, but they didn't study our strengths. And they definitely didn't study what happens when we combine all our strengths together. She began outlining her strategy, assigning teams to different areas of the Academy based on species capabilities and environmental advantages. Crystalline beings would control energy distribution, creating power surges and blackouts to confuse attackers. Cybernetic species would manage the Academy's defensive systems, using their advanced processing to coordinate automated defenses. Gas form entities would move through ventilation systems to scout and sabotage. Rock-based species would create physical barriers and ambush points. And humans? Jinwoo asked. Humans coordinate and adapt, Yuna said. We go wherever we're needed most and fill whatever gaps appear in the plan. As teams moved to their positions, Yuna found herself thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 6 weeks of questions that seemed stupid to everyone else had prepared her to understand exactly how each species could contribute to this defense. More importantly, those questions had taught her how different beings could work together in ways that none of them could achieve alone. Gamma Team reporting, came Wisp's voice through the communications. We have infiltrated the environmental control systems. Ready to reverse atmospheric conditions on your command. Delta Team in position, rumbled Granite's deep voice. Structural barriers prepared in corridors 7, 12, and 15. Epsilon Team ready, said Veltar. Energy distribution network under our control. Yuna watched the tactical display as the enemy ships approached. All teams, remember, they're expecting to find confused and disabled defenders. Instead, they're going to find the most coordinated multi-species force in galactic history. The first enemy ship docked with the Academy's main landing bay. Through the security cameras, Yuna could see armored figures moving through the corridors. They looked like a mix of different species, all equipped with advanced weapons and protective gear. They're using mixed species units too, Commander Vex observed. But they're not coordinated like we are, Yuna replied. Watch, she activated the first phase of her plan. Epsilon Team, initiate power fluctuations in sections 1 through 4. The lights throughout the landing bay area began flickering erratically. The enemy soldiers paused, apparently confused by the inconsistent power levels. Their equipment seemed to be having trouble adapting to the changing electrical conditions. Gamma Team, adjust atmospheric mixture in the main corridors. Reduce oxygen levels by 15%. The gas-form cadets began altering the air composition in areas where the attackers were moving. It wasn't enough to cause serious harm, but it would make the attackers feel slightly dizzy and disoriented. Delta Team, activate mogul barriers in Corridor 7. Granite and the other Stone Brotherhood cadets began moving massive structural elements to block and redirect the attackers' advance. The enemy soldiers found themselves forced into specific routes that led them exactly where Yuna wanted them to go. Beta Team, initiate sensor jamming in Sections 2 and 5. Thox and the cybernetic cadets began flooding the Academy's systems with false information, making it appear that defenders were located in areas where no one was actually present. While hiding the real positions of Academy forces, the result was exactly what Yuna had predicted. The enemy soldiers, expecting to encounter disabled and disorganized resistance, instead found themselves dealing with coordinated environmental manipulation that they couldn't understand or counter. Command, this is Alpha Team, came Veltaris. Voice, enemy forces are moving into the energy discharge chamber, ready to initiate containment. Do it! A brilliant flash of light erupted from Section 4 as the crystalline beings channeled massive amounts of energy through the Academy's power systems. The enemy soldiers in that area found themselves temporarily blinded and disoriented by energy levels that would have been fatal to most species, but which the crystalline beings could control precisely. Excellent work, Alpha Team, Beta Team. What's the status on the remaining enemy forces? 6 soldiers neutralized in Section 4, Thox reported. 12 more moving through corridors 9 and 10. They appear to be regrouping and changing tactics. Of course they are, Yuna said. They're adapting to our defenses. But that's okay, because we can adapt faster. She began adjusting the plan in real time, reassigning teams and changing tactics based on how the attackers responded. This was where human adaptability became crucial. The ability to see the big picture and modify strategy on the fly while coordinating multiple species with different capabilities. Gamma Team, I need you to create atmospheric barriers between the enemy groups. Split them up so they can't coordinate effectively. Delta Team, redirect barriers to funnel remaining attackers towards Section 12. Epsilon Team, prepare energy surge in Section 12 on my command. As the battle continued, Yuna realized that something remarkable was happening. The Academy cadets weren't just defending themselves, they were working together more effectively than any multi-species military unit in recorded history. Each species was contributing its unique strengths while others covered for their weaknesses, creating a combined force that was far more powerful than the sum of its parts. Commander Vex, she said during a brief lull in the fighting, are you recording this operation? Every detail, he replied. This will revolutionize multi-species military doctrine. That was the idea, Yuna said. Though I was hoping to have more time to develop the concepts before we had to use them in actual combat. Sometimes the best innovations come from necessity, Commander Vex observed. Final enemy group contained in Section 12, reported. Beta Team, ready for your orders. Yuna looked at the tactical display one last time. The attackers who had expected to find a disabled academy were now trapped in a small section of the building, surrounded by coordinated forces they had never imagined possible. All teams moved to final containment positions. Let's show these attackers what happens when they underestimate the power of cooperation. As Academy forces moved to surround the remaining enemies, Yuna felt a deep satisfaction. Her weeks of seemingly innocent questions had led to this moment, the first successful. The Academy's main conference room had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Representatives from 12 different species sat around a table designed to accommodate various forms of life, while holographic displays showed tactical analysis of the recent attack. At the center of it all sat Yuna, no longer pretending to be anything other than what she was, Fleet Admiral Kesvar. The Academy's commanding officer studied the reports with 4 different sets of eyes. The insectoid leader's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as she reviewed the data. In 30 years of military service, she said, I have never seen anything like this operation. A mixed-species cadet unit defeated trained attackers using coordination tactics that shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't be possible, agreed General Thane, a massive being from the Stone Confederation. Different species don't work together this effectively. Our neural patterns, our thinking processes, our basic approaches to problems are too different. Usually, yes, said Yuna. But that's because no one has ever tried to understand how those differences could become strengths instead of weaknesses. Commander. Vex leaned forward, his shadow form more solid than usual. Explain. Every species has evolved specific advantages for survival in their native environments, Yuna began. Crystalline beings manipulate energy efficiently. Cybernetic species process information rapidly. Gas-form entities can exist in multiple locations. Rock-based species provide incredible physical stability. Each of these is a tremendous strength, but also creates dependencies and limitations. We know this, said Admiral Kasvar. It's why mixed species units are typically ineffective. The limitations outweigh the benefits. Only if you don't understand how to coordinate the strengths. While compensating for the limitations, Yuna replied. That's what my mission was really about, learning how to make multi-species cooperation work instead of fail. Dr. Senevo, the Academy's chief of xenobiology, activated a holographic display showing genetic and behavioral profiles of different species. The theoretical framework is sound, but the practical implementation should be nearly impossible. How did you achieve this level of coordination? By asking questions that everyone thought were stupid, Yuna said.